We have decided, in theory at any rate, that what makes you native isn't being born here, isn't ancestry, isn't cultural immersion, isn't that sense of standing in the footsteps of others, that extraordinary feeling that if you are, I think, a native and you stand in Westminster Abbey at one extreme or a country churchyard at the other, you know hundreds of people like you have stood there before from generation to generation. We decided none of that actually matters, and that instead, merely a declaration, a piece of paper.
Breaking right now, David Starkey has faced a major backlash for saying, I think completely correctly, by the way, that the English native population is at threat of cancellation. This comes as a new poll reveals that 44% of all British people, by the way, it was reported wrongly in the MSM that this was just white British people. No, it's all British people agree with Slippery Starmer and say that they do feel like strangers in their own country. Now, you can look at the macro and the micro of this, and I would argue the micro is this decision by Greggs, Britain's favourite bakery, to say that it's going to remove all its cold sandwiches and bottled drinks from its self-service fridges. They're going to start putting them behind the counters because of efforts to curb shoplifting. As Chris Rose said, Britain is descending into an uncivilized, low-trust society. It is tragic. So I will show you, by the way, some of these shocking antics going on at Greggs. But before that, here's what David Starkey had to say about the changes that he believes are being forced on the English native population. We'll watch this, then we'll get analysis from Ezra Levant of Rebel News and Kathy Gingell of Conservative Woman.
We have decided, in theory at any rate, that what makes you native isn't being born here, isn't ancestry, isn't cultural immersion, isn't that sense of standing in the footsteps of others, that extraordinary feeling that if you are, I think, a native and you stand in Westminster Abbey at one extreme or a country churchyard at the other, you know hundreds of people like you have stood there before from generation to generation. We decided none of that actually matters, and that instead, merely a declaration, a piece of paper, a statement of citizenship. And it's this that the left is so outraged about. Its entire world view has been undercut. The idea that words take precedence over everything. Remember, the left and the soft right is basically a magical exercise. It believes that words, mere words, change things. This is why cancellation has become so important. The mere uttering of the slightest wrong phrase, saying a coloured person rather than a person of colour, was sufficient to destroy people's career. It's exactly this.
Kathy Gingell, is David Starkey right that the English native population is being almost wiped out in terms of its existence as a group of people by the establishment?
Well, it's being wiped out in different ways. It's being wiped out because the white population is fundamentally being accused of xenophobia as soon as it criticizes anything like mass immigration and the things that we've talked about, or uses the words as Lucy Connolly did, words that actually quite a lot of people would have been quite sort of sympathetic with. I was certainly incredibly alarmed and dismayed when I heard of this barbaric, brutal massacre of the children in Southport. It's made me very alarmed for young children in this society. But to say that, as I say that now, I will be accused of being xenophobic. And of course, it is mainly white British people who are going to make that judgment. There may be others too. There's certainly older immigrant generations who are extremely worried about exactly the same thing, who have integrated, want to integrate. But yes, and then there's simply the demographic demographics. I mean, I think London, it's now we're a white minority in London. I walk in parts of London and I feel it's not my country any longer. I'm my age. I'm into my seventh decade, I think, which is horrible.
I refuse to believe it, Kathy.
But,
You look far too good for that.
but even it, and people say, "Oh, you're old. You haven't adapted. You haven't grown up in it." But no, I mean, I have to say, if I'd wanted to go and live in the Middle East, I would go and live in the Middle East and not find it on the Uxbridge Road or in East London or in Tower
Well, of course,
Hamlets.
we don't even
I
have
know I'm
English
not allowed.
names.
That makes me racist. I'm not racist. There's certain aspects of an imposition of a culture on my culture that I find very alarming because fundamentally so much of it is anti-democratic and it's so regressive in terms of women and in terms of fundamental rights. Or indeed these fundamentals, freedom of speech. So yes, of course, David Starkey's right. And I mean, we saw today the inauguration of the Rotherham mayor. I mean, a very dutiful looking woman sitting there with her veil on. And as I tweeted, I could only see 3 women in that picture. I don't think I could see any white Brits at all. I mean, maybe there aren't any white Brits living back in Rotherham, but only 3 of the women were without veils. Well, to me, I've never been a feminist, but I've always been a believer in female equality. What does that say about modern British womanhood? To me, it's horrifying. Absolutely horrifying because the veil is a symbol of submission. What has happened?
I
So
know.
yes, David Starkey is right.
But first, you know I never recommend anything on this show unless I truly believe in it. Today, I've got something absolutely game-changing for you. Have you ever stopped to think about how crucial comfort is down there? Well, let me tell you, today's Outspoken proudly sponsored by Sheath Underwear, the revolutionary brand shaking up men's comfort across the globe. And here's what makes Sheath even better. It was founded by a US Army veteran, Robert Patton, while he was serving in Iraq back in 2007. So that's right, this isn't just any underwear brand, it was designed for the toughest conditions imaginable. Patton was battling relentless heat and discomfort in full combat gear, and he thought there has to be a better way, so he created it. And let's be honest, traditional underwear just doesn't cut it anymore. Sheath's innovative dual pouch design ensures your comfort all day long, keeping things separate, cool, and fresh. Imagine your essentials being comfortably cradled away from unwanted friction and heat. Trust me, it is genuinely transformative. I've tested it at the gym, on long days at work, even just relaxing at home. And I'm telling you, once you've experienced Sheath, there's simply no going back. They're stylish, they're supportive, and they deliver unmatched comfort. It's like upgrading from economy to first class, but for your underwear. Right now, I'm offering you an exclusive 20% discount at www.sheath.com. Yes, that's 20% off your entire order when you use my special promo code Outspoken at checkout. So what are you waiting for? Sheath, by the way, ladies, also the perfect present for your husband, your boyfriend, your son, your brother, or hard to buy for best mate. And while you are there, check this out. There are female versions available too, which you can see here alongside the brilliant boss of the UFC, because Sheath is the first official underwear of that brilliant sport. So click the link below, enter Outspoken at checkout, go to www.sheath.com and thank me later when you're feeling comfortable, confident, and ready to tackle anything your day throws at you. Sheath underwear, redefine comfort one pair at a time. But now, back to the show. Ezra Levant, is David Starkey correct?
Yeah, one of the things Professor Starkey talks about is a high trust society, and that comes from centuries of communal thinking. And I mean, look at the word nation. It comes from the root word to be born there, natal, and you can't just bring massive numbers of people over. They will not integrate. And I have become using the phrase indigenous British people. or indigenous Irish people, because it's true. And every other ethnic group around the world that National Geographic has told us about, indigenous people in the Brazilian rainforest, indigenous people, in the plains of North America. How about the indigenous people in the UK and Ireland and other places like that? Don't they have a right to their culture? And and I see a theme in a lot of Western countries. I don't see this happening in the third world or in Asian countries or African countries. That people come and destroy their culture or water it down or replace it. It's a unique phenomenon in the West, and I think it's being piped into different countries without the consent of the governed. I have never seen a referendum or even an election in France, UK, Canada on the issue of mass immigration. Donald Trump made it an issue and won. And Nigel
Never,
Farage may
never.
win on that issue
But for
too.
60 years. Or 60, because obviously, there's all of this negativity in the mainstream media that has shrouded Enoch Powell and the Rivers of Blood speech. But actually, if you go back and you look at the polling, even 60 years ago, 2/3 of Brits totally agreed with Enoch Powell, and we have been ignored when it comes to mass immigration for 6 decades, ushering in the nightmare that Enoch Powell warned about. But look, I want to look at the micro now. I mentioned Greg's. This matters. Ezra, do you know about Greg's, by the way?
Of course, as you can see, you don't get a body like this without knowing about Greg's.
So look at what is now going on every single day at virtually every Greg's up and down the country.
Shoplifting within this store will not be tolerated. Remotely monitored audio and video.
Have you just nicked stuff from Greg's?
Yeah.
It's one of Britain's high street institutions, but now even Greg's has become a hotbed of shoplifting. A Sun investigation today lays bare the full extent of how branches of the beloved bakery chain are being ransacked every day by Britain's marauding.
And Conservative MP Matt Vickers, who's actually doing some really good work, is taking on this issue.
I love Greggs. That's why I'm devastated by the news today that because of prolific shoplifters, because shoplifting is through the roof, Greggs have made a decision to look behind their counter, their sandwiches, their soft drinks, maybe even their multi-buy sausage rolls to tackle it. A horrendous situation. That's why we put forward an amendment to the crime and policing bill that would have seen prolific shoplifters forced to face a ban, a tag, or a curfew. It's a really sad sign for Greggs. It's a really sad sign for high streets across the country. These people need to face consequences for their actions. Stop stealing our sausage rolls.
But Kathy, this is just evidence, isn't it, of a low trust society.
It's evidence of decriminalisation by our, again, wonderful judiciary and police establishments, the people who run them, decriminalisation of shoplifting, along with decriminalisation of stabbing, which are both massively on the rise. So while we incarcerate people like Lucy and Tommy, we are letting thousands and thousands of people go without sanction, without comeback, on stealing and stabbing. And people are scared again. I was in a Boots actually 2 years ago, towards the end of lockdown, I seem to remember, and I saw a chap came in with a hood and just swept the shelf clear. And I shouted, "Stop, stop, stop." And there was a security guard standing there. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm not allowed. My compliance doesn't allow me. I've been told that I can't interfere with a shoplifter." So we've got a complete breakdown in community. I mean, this is another aspect of our disintegration of our society as part of what David Starkey talks about. And so nobody behaves. There's no have a go hero. Nobody. I mean, that's why you think how amazing the brave people were at Southport. But mainly people won't do this, and it is all to do, there's a great theory in America about, it's what's it called, windowless crimes, I'm trying to remember.
Broken windows theory, yeah.
Yes, if you don't hit the small crime, your society runs out of
Well, it's how Rudy Giuliani turned around New York, wasn't it? And it feels like, Ezra, I mean, look, can London be saved? given it's not just London, obviously, what's happening at Greg's, but I mean, it does seem to be the epicenter of a lot of this.
London has to want to be saved too. And some of the systems in place, I believe the security guard that they were told, don't interfere. You could get hurt. Someone's stealing a few $100s, no point getting wounded, or God forbid, worse, that could cost thousands or tens of thousands. So I believe that the system permits it and people game the system. Back in Canada, there's so many foreign students. There's 1 million people who claim to be foreign students. And they've discovered that Canadian niceness has set up things called food banks, where if you're hungry and poor, you come and get free food. And many of these foreign students say, oh, free food. That's stupid. Let's go get it. That's what happens when people from a low trust society come to a high trust society. They just run rampant. But everyone has to agree that we're not going to tolerate that. You're so right to say the Rudy Giuliani approach of broken windows, as in crack down on the little things, but you need the buy-in of everybody. And I remember hearing one of the Giuliani staffers talk about it, how sometimes it was just 1 or 2 or 3 gang members that would terrify an entire city block. Hundreds of people would live in fear of 1 or 2 or 3 guys that if you ever swept them off the street, you would liberate hundreds. And I think that London is not too far gone to be saved, but with Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer, and I mean, is it really going to be, or I mean, I saw him the other day talking about someone who was pooping in like an encampment and talked about how glorious refugees are for the UK. If you forgive and tolerate and subsidize every malady, of course you're going to have this descent into decline.
Yeah, it's very, very disturbing. It very much is. And yeah, I know some of those images that you're talking about, Ezra, they're not pretty. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.